Hello, everyone. Welcome to our newish Hardfire media project we are calling Liberal Discussions. The idea comes from classical liberalism, which is based on free speech, freedom of religion, and equal rights under the law. These discussions are available on our Hardfire YouTube channel. We used to make these things in downtown Brooklyn down there, which is locked, so that we're now doing independent programming. My name is Cameron Weber. I'm an economist and a historian and the producer of the show. And today's topic is the C virus and essential services, where we left off last time, is who decides what an essential service is, how, with what right, and who gets affected and why. Why do they make these decisions? And who gives them the right to make the decisions, and how does that affect people's daily lives? That's tea, natural tea, antivirus, homeopathy stuff. So this says the novel coronavirus and essential services in Mandarin. And this means really green energy. So essential in Mandarin means green energy. And then you'll see that there's a subtitle here, or something else called New Respiratory Problem. And the reason that's there is because the person who did this translations is a medical professional and looks into alternative medicines, and found that there's somebody who created an independent emergency room in Manhattan, who said that what's going on now he has never seen before, and it's like being on the top of K2. It's like being in a very high altitude. So people are in a it feels, and then you can't breathe, and then after a while, when you come down the mountain, then you can breathe again. And he said that the standardized approach that people are making now at the hospitals under our socialized medicine, or whatever it is, centrally planned medicine, is wrong, because when you put these respiratory things on, your lungs aren't allowed to build up their strength. So that's why we've got here a new respiratory problem next to the novel coronavirus, because he says it's nothing like any previous coronaviruses. It's something new. And so right, one of the common themes in our discussions is that the state seeks enlarged discretionary power for existential reasons. And here's Dijase again, who was under the Hungarian Iron Curtain, and was treated poorly by a bureaucrat. He said, "People like you will never work in this state." So he moved elsewhere. See, unlike as discussed last time, for example, in Sweden, where the state has allowed people to use their own discretion, which has meant less economic disaster, than in those jurisdictions which may have overreacted. And for example, the United States now, where we have U.S. unemployment is the worst since the Great Depression of the 1930s. In other words, our lockdown is much worse than the wage and price controls that Roosevelt put on, but we can talk about that. Right, so we're going to be talking about essential services. Now each guest will identify themselves and say hello to our viewers, if and when we have any. Let's start with Bradley, who's not here. I haven't showered or shaved in a couple days. You'll be done by the time I'm ready. So anyway, that's how that works, because he can't get a haircut. Okay, so we'll start with Derek.
Well, I'm Derek, as you know. I'm self-employed. I don't have any particular credential. but I have a lot of opinions.
You're not a credentialed apparatchik. Yeah. So you don't have the right to determine. Is your self-employment essential?
Some of it is. Actually, probably most of it is.
And you're able to perform that because you don't need a credential for what you're doing.
Yes. Well, I should say I have a very minimal credential for what I'm doing.
You're in shape enough to be a bike messenger.
Yes.
Something like that. Yeah. And then next we would have Francisco.
So my name is Francisco Aldape. I am an economist. I've been studying economics for the past few years. I started teaching this semester, but with the pandemic, I don't know what the next semester if I'm going to be hired, but hopefully I find something online to teach or to if I can work remotely from home, right? Like many of the non-essential works can be done from home. So I guess I had a student who asked me,
So you're saying teaching is non-essential?
yeah, a student asked me if if a teacher, if a student ask, is teaching essential? And I said, well, since I'm teaching online, probably it's not, because after all, like Derek is saying, you can go to your public library and pick up Adam Smith, Marx, and read about them, right? So,
but you think it's essential, right? Otherwise, you wouldn't be doing it.
oh yeah, it's essential for my own, and also I think I want to help society. So I think actually that one of the roles the economist has to do is to try to improve the conditions of I know you don't like the word welfare, welfare economics, but I believe that as economists, instead of like if they want to like we talked about how most of them are mathematicians. If you
Yeah,
want to be
exactly.
mathematicians is fine, but the purpose of economics should be to help people and not
Right.
stuff.
So yeah. So you're the opposite. You're different than I'm a laissez-faire, laissez-passer, free market economist, where you believe that economists perform an essential role by intervening
Right. Correct.
in active monetary and fiscal policy.
Correct.
And how about in regulation?
That's important too. Yeah.
You don't think it leads to capture?
Oh well, that's a big issue that we can talk about. But
Yeah, we will be
for sure, I think that even though I try to teach students that the government has an important role to play, well, it has been captured for many reasons in the last couple of years, right?
Yeah. I saw some recent research that you've done. It looks real good. You bring up both sides of the issues. Great. And then so next we've got Greg. Greg in Australia. Are you locked down over there?
Hi, Cameron.
Yeah.
Just checking. Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
I think I've dropped out.
No, we can hear you. We can hear you.
You can't hear me, can you?
Yes, we can. We can hear you well, Greg.
Okay. Greg here in Melbourne, Australia. Okay, there may be a bit of delay here, so I'll speak slowly and I'll leave gaps between what I say. Yeah, thanks, Cameron. Yeah, Greg here. I'm a retired ex-corporate person. My interest really is through my long-term friendship with Cameron and his work and the interesting ideas. So I'm really here to give you, a feel for what it's like in a different country and probably the man in the street view, the average person in Australia, I guess.
Greg, we met in Kazakhstan, and you were helping with one of the largest investments in the ex-Soviet Union, right? Uh-oh, did we lose Greg? Yeah. So Greg was we might have lost.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah.
Yeah, dropping in and out, unfortunately.
Yeah. So, Greg, what you were doing in Kazakhstan, was that essential? We might have lost Greg. We'll stick around, Greg, and hopefully you can come back in. We got a nice picture of you anyway. So thank you for participating in the discussion. We discussed last time how certain areas, especially in our Socialist Republic of NYC, have had draconian lockdown measures compared to other places in the world, especially Sweden, Hong Kong, and Ghana. And I was going to ask Greg what type of unemployment they've got there. Greg, we can't see you, but can you say something?
I am here. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Now that you took off your picture, we can hear you much better. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's all happening of its own accord. The technology is driving us, Cameron. But anyway, while you can hear me, sorry, just stepping back on Kazakhstan, we were providing satellite services to the oil and gas industry, which is a massive investment at the time and completely changed those countries after the fall of the Soviet Union. So when you suggest that as an essential service, it was an essential services to those industries, and I guess essential to have that investment, which, you know, they've really capitalized on in the 20 years since you and I've been there, and become quite a rich country as a result of it. Without outside communication services, they couldn't possibly have run those businesses and developed the oil and gas field. So they were essential services, at least for that segment of the economy.
Awesome. Yeah. Okay, so we left off last time before, as Greg mentioned, we could have a discussion around what are essential services. More importantly, who decides what these services are and why? And that's the main theme of today's discussion. Francisco is our director today. He's going to keep us on track here. An observation I would like to make, and this is not my own, but comes from the Foundation for Economic Education, is that at least in NYC and around our neighborhood, certain businesses are declared essential by the city and some are not. One of the tenets of liberalism is the right to choose your own means of making a living through the fruits of your own labor. And then this is the theme question here. Once we turn over the decision as to what is essential and what is not, we run down the slippery slope towards a non-liberal society where society becomes more and more political and coercive and less voluntary and cooperative. Am I wrong? This open discussion.
You know, how's this for a metaphor that I thought of? Would you say that food and water are essential?
Right.
But
Yeah.
but how long can you live without food versus how long can you live without water? And then to take it further, in my years of teaching, we would have this visual model called Maslow's hierarchy of needs.
Yeah, I know it.
Some of you have heard of it.
Yeah.
Where you know, there's like basic needs, you know, that people have when they have virtually nothing at the survival level. And then as your more basic needs are met, you know, when you have the basic survival needs, then you have more complex needs that you wouldn't necessarily care about or need at a lower level. So I guess what I'm trying to bring out is that there's probably such a thing as a spectrum of necessity. Some things are maybe more immediately essential, and maybe things are you can go longer periods without. And some things are more essential to certain people than others.
Yeah, and who decides? In economics, that's experts decide versus consumer sovereignty.
It would be a very individual situation. I mean, we're not all in the exact same situation.
We're not. No.
And since more complicated, since we're in an economy, okay, maybe I provide something that's not essential. Maybe I provide party planning. Maybe that's right now. Who needs that? But I'm still part of the economy in the sense that, okay, nobody needs my service right now, but you know, you can close my store. But then, how do I interact with the economy? How do I how do I buy more essential things
Right.
if you close my maybe not essential business?
Yeah, that's the decision of what's essential and not essential is a superficial thing because it misses all the supply chains that feed into everything, not least of which is
Unless you're going to pay me directly to stay, to pay my business and stay open and not work, unless society is going to do that for me for the entire duration of the pandemic, which is probably not sustainable.
yeah, we talked about that the first
Yeah.
first liberal discussion of how we can just get rid of all of this pandering and give everyone a basic income at the same cost. Yeah. But back to your point, Derek, I'm glad you brought that up because the other day, we've got some friends in the co-op here. I live in a co-op, and our friends came in, and I said, we're all wearing the masks, So I told my friend in Montreal about this show, and I said, oh, it's good to talk to people without masks. Anyway, so they're coming in with their masks on. I said, how's it going? And they say, oh, we lost our business. And their business was, and again, I could be making this up, right? Their business is supplying props and stage props for fashion photography, right? So fashion photography, and then I guess the same metaphor idea could then apply to what we're doing right now. Is what we're doing essential? But the point is they lost their business because they couldn't afford to pay the warehouse fees, right?
But maybe on one hand, you might say maybe that's in a hands-off economy. Maybe that's their lack of preparation. They didn't have a plan for 8 weeks of shutdown. They had no money saved to survive that. Maybe they weren't ready.
That's a good point, and I think we're gonna be getting there. Yeah, that's called only the large firms survive. Only the firms that the state decides are worthy. And that's called corporatism, where the state decides which, and these are big businesses, right? So it's the entrepreneur, the startup, the individual person who gets hurt, and especially that came home because our friends lost their business. So speaking of state discretionary power, here's another story. For example, we have some friends, and I could be making this up, who had a shop selling freshly made tortillas. And around 5 weeks ago, a New York City Fire Department official walked around the neighborhood where they have their shop, and so I would visit them from time to time to make sure they're still in business. And then I noticed that they're no longer allowing people into the store. Right? They weren't worried that their business was going to be shut down because bread is essential, food's essential. But they did have, so I said, did the fire official come along in their truck to see if you're doing curbside only? And they said, no, he came along with a clipboard. So they're out there, monitoring with a clipboard. And what's that? That's, showing you've got power.
Yeah.
The symbolism of the clipboard.
Pretty much. And so I was wondering if anybody else has personal examples of the state's symbolism of power in these times. And Bradley's not joining us because he wasn't able to get the essential service of a shave and a haircut. So, but Bradley last time said that he was a constitutionalist, and I wanted to ask him if constitutionalism means following a clear, delineated, and unchanging rule of law, or why he called himself a constitutionalist. Yeah. So does anyone else have any examples of soft power?
Well, what about, I was just reading this article from the Los Angeles Times that was shared by a mutual friend, Cameron.
Oh, yeah.
The title of the article is "The Rich Infected the Poor as COVID-19 Spread Around the World." So, I mean, going back to this issue that who are the people who are able to normally move around the world, right? I mean, they are the rich, the wealthy people.
Yeah.
And so the problem is here, I mean, when we think about who are the most impacted, right? The
Yeah.
big companies. You were talking about corporatism.
Yeah.
The big companies are getting bailed out.
Yeah.
They have all these, even though they made all this profit in the previous years, they, I mean, apparently that profit was not saved. But
No, it went to political campaigns.
talking about people who require, like in the informal economy, right? Since I come from a less developing economy, I can, relate to that and see that people, who cannot work day by day, they'll really have to, like, how do they survive? It's like, so how do they get food or water if not, by stealing? I mean, this could really create a lot of social unrest around the world, right? If this thing continues.
Yeah, social unrest. That's what I guess I'll quote Bradley, even though he's not here. I won't be ready for about it because I wanted to just mention what he said. Insurrection all around. People are tired of the hoax. New York is next once it's warm enough. But Francisco, I read in The Economist. Did you ever read the Bellow section in The Economist magazine about Latin?
No, that's the only subscription. I read Financial Times, the Wall Street Journal, and I try to not read New York Times, but I think I have to because I am here. But The Economist, I don't read it.
Well, if you're a teacher, reading the New York Times is an essential service because it's the paper of record.
Well, they gave me, the school provides it, right? So.
Yeah. But in the Bellow thing, it says in Latin America, people are saying, I'd rather die of the virus than starve to death.
Right. That's the problem. So it's a big issue. I mean, and this is going to increase inequality in these parts of the world, right? So
those that survive it, anyway.
Well, unless you have faith in all of these food pantries and all these assistance programs that are springing up to provide food for people who can't.
Around here in New York, right?
If you have faith in those things, then you're not going to starve.
Yeah, but you do have to wait. And are you talking about private ones or publicly provided ones? That's what Shousey said the other day. Is you're not going to starve in New York as long as you don't mind waiting in line at the closed school to get the
Well, in New York, they have them that are delivered to you.
Right. Do you do that, Derek?
Well, a few of my neighbors get it. Neighbors love anything free, and they get.
There is no such thing as a free lunch.
Where they line up at pantries, and a lot of them don't like the vegetarian food, so they give it to me. A whole bunch of random stuff, and like my neighbor will give me a bag of squash or a bag of 10 pounds of potatoes or onions, or because they don't really like the vegetables that much, but they get a lot of free stuff.
Quinoa and asparagus.
Yes, for the white people. Yeah.
Quinoa
Rarely quinoa, but it's not the most it's not restaurant food. It's probably more closer to school lunch. But I mean, you're not going to starve, but you can't be picky.
Nice.
How long can that be sustained for? That
I have no idea.
Can this, can't go forever. Can't go forever, really. The economy grinds to a halt and collapses. And the ability of anyone to provide anything for other people becomes limited, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Normally, the pantries in the city are stores bring their close to expiration food.
Exactly.
And they get But of course, that's in a normally functioning economy.
That's right. And the longer we're in this situation, the less normal functioning it becomes. And those things have got to become harder and more scarce, and things become more desperate, I guess, unless we move forward on some sort of basis.
That's the controversy. The controversy is this something that can be sustained for a temporary basis? And should we have the faith to believe that if we just stick it out, that we'll be patient and then we can resume our normal activities afterwards. That's the controversy, whether that's truthful or not.
Yeah. And the other controversy too is at what point you start lifting restrictions with a risk of COVID-19 taking off, potentially even worse than it's been in each each location, and then we're much, much worse off. And that's the dilemma and the political and social discussion here in Australia. We've done fairly well minimising the impact of COVID-19, and now it's like, well, we really need to open the economy up, but is it too early to do that, or do we really need to take the risk? And that's where we had a little bit more tension now between the population and the government. And there's a little bit of a mood, even in the last week since we've spoken, against the state and federal government saying, you know, we really need to take some risks and open things up because, you know, the consequences of keeping everything locked down is potentially worse than being able to manage the COVID-19 outbreaks. And our federal government's pushing to open things further, but the state governments are very reluctant to do it. So we're starting to get that little bit of a federal state issue that you guys experienced over the last month, which wasn't evident here until probably the last week. But again, it's about essential services.
It is.
Which are essential at this point and not.
Greg, I was going to ask you before you disappeared and we got the latency problem figured out by getting rid of the picture and having voice only. What's unemployment like there?
Yeah, our unemployment's gone up to about 10 or 11%, whereas normally it sits at around the 5 or a little bit under 5, maybe between 4 and 5, and that's been consistent for quite a few years. But we're expecting the next lot of figures might take us up into the, you know, somewhere between 10 and 15%.
Yeah, the United States is officially at 15%, which is the Great Depression. Yeah, we were talking about what's going to be the result here. It was in the United States, it was 15% for 10 years.
Probably that one is a little bit higher because I was reading Krugman in the New York Times, your favorite economist.
Especially on the opinion page, I love that. Yeah.
When he says that if you read the whole unemployment report, the figure, I mean, they don't know if it could really be higher than 14. You're talking about 20% already.
Yeah.
It always tends to be undercalculated, doesn't it?
Right. Even that. So you're better off looking at U6, and that one is like 24% already. 25%.
Exactly. Yeah. Right. Well, yeah. That's a holdover back from 10 years ago crisis with the dropout in the labor force participation rate. Okay, so back to essential services and then what it does. Oh, I was going to say that, yeah, maybe we're going to regress to a hunter-gatherer society where you have to go out to the park and get dandelions. And we already have. That's right. Derek has. Derek is pretty self-sufficient off-grid, right?
Mostly.
So you were prepared then for this, is what you're telling us.
I didn't know what the situation was going to be, but I knew something was happening. I don't know if it was going to be a terrorist attack or a war, but I knew something was happening.
And we actually did a Hardfire show on electricity provision and that, right? So are you Derek? Are you self-sufficient in electricity?
All that you're seeing is off solar. Everything you're seeing, refrigerator. So.
And then what do you do at night?
I don't turn anything on.
That's pretty cool. So solar power energy.
Yeah.
Self-sufficient. But you also have a generator.
I mean, by the way, this is like a very wake up, kind of like an early wake up call, because imagine if, I mean, I don't know what's your position with the climate issue, but if the climate issue, I mean, if people are, now that we are doing this for this virus, the next question is like, are we going to do this for a climate, to try to resolve or try to, contain this? Because if it just continues to deteriorate, then this is probably going to be nothing compared to what people, future generations are going to be experiencing, right?
You're so
I mean, if you care about future generations.
Definitely, and that's why I'm so against all the creation of all this debt and giving away $1 trillion to everybody. That's why I definitely care about future generations. But my niece is giving a valedictorian speech.
The lack of immediacy.
Huh?
I think the difference between this and that is the lack of immediacy. the sense that,
Right.
you know, the cause effect here is so close and so obvious. Whereas with climate issues, there's a little bit of a separation and some reasoning involved. So there's a lot of way to muddy the water
Right.
and detach the cause from the effect.
Yeah.
Do you think people do you think people's attitudes will change? Because all of us, people's problem with climate change before is, oh, well, it doesn't affect me immediately today or this week. I'm not going to worry about it as an individual. But this pandemic has, for the first time for whole generations of people, it has been, no, these things can happen and they will impact you directly. So maybe people will start thinking about those things a little bit differently going forward.
Right, exactly.
I wanted to address Francisco's issue about climate change. Back to the captured economy. If and I don't want to, I'm not going to name any political parties. We'll have Derek can do that later if he wants. But if we really are concerned about climate change, why don't we have free trade in solar panels? In other words, why did a certain president prior to our current president put on trade barriers against Chinese solar panels, making them more expensive, right? So why, if politicians are really concerned about climate change, then why don't we have free trade in solar panels?
You almost answered your own question then, I think.
He wanted to do
whether they were concerned or not.
I thought he wanted to bolster American manufacturing by protectionism.
Exactly. So looking at Derek, then we've realized if we're concerned about climate change, then, well, it's up to the individuals to do something about it. Like buy solar panels, but they're more expensive. Okay.
I got mine used. They're actually very cheap.
And you fixed them up yourself?
No, they were fine. I bought them used. They were taken off of something like a temporary installation. Very cheap.
But you also have a generator in your garage, right?
No, I got rid of it. It was too much trouble. Too much trouble.
All right. So back to essential services, if you don't mind. Francisco, how much time do we have left? Do you have any idea?
Well, it's 5:53, so
Got 7 minutes. Boy. So it looks like we're going to have to do this again because we haven't even touched some of the major issues that we wanted to touch this time.
It'd be like that.
Yeah. So why don't we wrap it up? And this time I won't forget to put in the closing music, and then I won't be so ambitious on the script next time. Yeah.
Always try to bite off more than we can discuss.
We keep going. Yeah.
But keep us on topic though.
Yeah, I'll try to keep us more on topic. No, this was a good conversation. So again, I'm Cameron Weber, the producer and host of Hardfire Media Liberal Discussions. Thank you for watching our show on essential services and lockdown. And does anybody else have anything they want to say as we part ways for the time being? Before we have to go put our masks on, anyone have anything to add?
Be safe.
Yeah. Okay. So we'll see you next time on Hardfire Media Liberal Discussions. Thank you for watching and thank you for participating.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
No.
Cheers, mate.
take care, everybody.